There is a kind of test that arrives without an audience. No speech. No warning. No one standing nearby to admire your composure or pity your fear. Just a dead engine on a Death Valley road, high noon pressing down on the windshield, no cell signal, and the metallic click of the ignition failing again and again. The empty water bottle sits where you can see it. That is the moment the mind wants to turn an event into a verdict. The engine failed, so I am doomed. The signal is gone, so I am abandoned. The heat is real, so panic must be obeyed. But Epictetus would stop the chain before it becomes command. The event has happened. The impression has appeared. The judgment is still waiting for your assent. This is the inner task no one sees. Not to pretend the situation is harmless. Not to decorate danger with brave words. But to keep the ruling faculty from surrendering its post. The road, the engine, the signal, the sun, none of these are yours to govern. But the next judgment is, the first discipline in that car is not movement. It is separation. A person under pressure usually wants the world to become simple. Either the engine starts or everything is lost. Either the phone finds a signal or the mind declares itself abandoned. Either the sun gives mercy or the situation becomes an enemy. But this is exactly where Epictetus would draw the line with no softness and no panic. What is yours? Your judgment. Your assent. Your intention. Your attention. Your next response. What is not yours? The failed engine. The empty signal bars. The hour of the day. The heat on the road. The distance to help. The past decision that put you on that stretch of desert. The fact that the ignition gives you only that metallic click and no answer. This division does not make the situation easy. It makes it clear. The untrained mind believes clarity is supposed to feel comforting. It is not. Clarity may feel severe. It may look at you and say, the engine is not under your command. The tower is not under your command. The sun is not under your command. Your preference has no authority over metal, weather, or distance. You may hate that fact. You may argue with it. You may replay every turn that brought you here. But none of that gives you command over what has already left your hands. So the task begins where command actually remains. You do not govern whether the car starts. You govern whether the failed start becomes a sentence against your mind. You do not govern whether the phone connects. You govern whether the blank screen becomes proof that you have been personally singled out by fate. You do not govern whether the water bottle is empty. You govern whether that object becomes a symbol of panic or a reminder to examine the next action. The empty water bottle is not philosophy by itself. It is plastic, light, useless for thirst. But attention can use it. It can bring the mind back from the enormous imagined future to the immediate fact in front of it. It can say, here is the event. Here is the impression. Here is the judgment trying to attach itself. Do not sign too quickly. That is the boundary of control. Not control over the desert. Control over assent. When the ignition clicks again, the sound presses the mind toward a conclusion. It says, in the language of pressure, this is unbearable. But the click does not actually say that. The click is only a sound. Metal failing to answer. The mind adds the rest. The mind turns sound into prediction, prediction into fear, fear into command. It does this quickly, so quickly that a person may believe the command came from the road itself. But the command did not come from the road. It came from judgment. This matters because a judgment can be inspected. An engine failure cannot be reversed by wishing. A lost signal cannot be restored by outrage. A hot road cannot be cooled by complaint. But a judgment can be stopped at the gate. It can be questioned before it rules the body. Epictetus was not asking people to live without pressure. He was asking them to stop granting pressure the rank of master. There is a difference between danger and slavery to impression. Danger belongs to circumstances. Slavery begins when the mind says, because this is happening, I no longer have responsibility for how I respond. That sentence is false. You may have fewer options. You may have no comfortable options. You may have no option that gives you certainty. But lack of certainty is not lack of moral agency. The ruling faculty is not measured by how many favorable conditions surround it. It is measured by whether it can still choose with discipline when favorable conditions disappear. In that stranded car, responsibility becomes very plain. You are not responsible for making the desert safe. You are responsible for not making your judgment worse than the desert. You are not responsible for commanding rescue to appear on your schedule. You are responsible for refusing to let panic take the seat where reason belongs. You are not responsible for changing high noon into evening. You are responsible for noticing that the mind is trying to treat discomfort as authority. This is not passive. It is not resignation. It is the first act of sane conduct. Before any outer action can be chosen well, the inner court must be brought back into order. The facts must be named without exaggeration. The preferences must be admitted without worshipping them. The fear must be seen without handing it the keys. The car is stopped. The signal is absent. The bottle is empty. The sun is high. That is the event. Now comes the part that belongs to you. You may say, this is hard. You may say, this is dangerous. You may say, this requires care, attention, and disciplined action. All of that can be true. But the moment you say, this has taken my capacity to choose, you have added a falsehood to the event. And often, the added falsehood becomes heavier than the event itself. The boundary of control is not a comforting slogan. It is a line drawn in the dust. On one side, engine, signal, sun, distance, timing, outcome. On the other, judgment, assent, attention, intention, conduct. The untrained mind keeps crossing the line, trying to manage what is not its property, while neglecting what is. The Stoic task is to return. Again and again. Not with drama. Not with speeches. With the plain authority of a person who understands where duty begins. In the silence after the failed ignition, that duty is small and exact. Do not confuse the event with the verdict. Do not let the first impression become law. Do not abandon the only part of the situation that still answers to you. The mind does not first meet the desert as philosophy. It meets it as an impression. The road is empty. The engine will not turn over. The phone cannot reach a signal. The sun is not a symbol, it is heat. The water bottle is not a lesson, it is empty. The ignition gives that same metallic click, sharp and useless, and the first appearance rushes in before reason has finished standing up. This is bad. This is urgent. This is against me. That is how an impression arrives. It does not ask permission. It enters quickly, wearing the clothing of fact. To the unexamined mind, it feels like knowledge. But Epictetus would insist on the distinction. An impression is not yet truth. It is the first report. It may contain facts, but it also carries force, color, fear, memory, and prediction. The engine failed. That is fact. No signal appears. That is fact. High noon bears down on the car. That is fact. But I am finished. I have no choice, panic must decide. This has authority over my worth. These are not facts. These are judgments trying to attach themselves to facts. This is where most people lose the inner task. They do not lose it because they are weak. They lose it because the transition from impression to judgment happens so quickly that it feels like one thing. The click of the ignition seems to contain the entire conclusion. The empty road seems to speak. The blank phone screen seems to announce a verdict. The empty water bottle seems to accuse. But none of those externals can form a judgment. Only the mind can do that. The ignition can fail. It cannot declare you ruined. The phone can show no signal. It cannot declare you abandoned by reason. The bottle can be empty. It cannot command panic. The sun can make the situation serious. It cannot make your ruling faculty worthless. Assent is the point where you either sign the impression or hold it for examination. That word matters. Assent is not the same as feeling a shock. It is not the same as noticing fear. It is not the same as understanding danger. A person may feel the body react before any deliberate thought appears. That is part of being human. The Stoic question is not whether the first wave arrives. The Stoic question is whether you give that wave the authority to govern the next act. The assent trap in this car is speed. The mind wants to move faster than judgment. It wants relief from uncertainty, even if that relief comes in the form of a bad conclusion. Panic offers a kind of false simplicity. It says, do something now, anything now, because the feeling is unbearable. But a feeling is not a law. An impression is not a commander. Urgency may be real, but urgency does not cancel the need for examined choice. So the discipline is to insert a pause. Not a lazy pause. Not denial. Not pretending time has no weight. A governing pause. A pause that says, I see the impression. I hear the click. I see the empty bottle. I see the signal is gone. I also see the judgment trying to rush in behind these facts. Then name it. This is an impression that the situation has taken command of me. That sentence gives the ruling faculty room to stand. It separates the event from the inner edition. The event is outside. The edition is inside. The event may be severe. The edition may be false. If you cannot separate them, you will obey both as if both were equally real. This is why Epictetus cared so much about impressions. Human beings do not suffer only from events. They suffer from the judgments they attach to events and then forget that they attach them. A man is not merely facing a dead engine. He is facing the story that the dead engine has become proof of his helplessness. He is not merely looking at an empty road. He is meeting the thought that emptiness means abandonment. He is not merely holding an empty water bottle. He is encountering the claim that need has erased choice. But the bottle can serve another purpose. It can bring the mind back to the present object. Not to worship it. Not to make it dramatic. Simply to use it as a point of discipline. The bottle is empty. Good. Let the mind say only that. Do not add a verdict. Do not add insult. Do not add prophecy. Let the object train attention in accuracy. Empty bottle. Failed ignition. No signal. Hi son. These are reports. Now ask what judgment is trying to enter. The dangerous judgment is not this requires care. That is reasonable. The dangerous judgment is because this requires care, I no longer answer for my assent. That is where freedom is traded for impulse. That is where the mind gives an external thing a rank it has not earned. Stoic discipline does not remove pressure from the scene. It removes false authority from the pressure. The car may still be dead. The road may still be empty. The phone may still be useless. But the inner government has not been dissolved unless you dissolve it. The first appearance may shout. The judgment may rush forward. The trap may invite speed. Still, assent remains yours. And in that narrow space, the whole task begins again. Ascesis is not a word for a quiet study, safely removed from trouble. It means training. And training is revealed when the body wants relief, when the mind wants certainty, when the world refuses to arrange itself around your preference. In that car, on that road, under that high sun, Stoic practice is not an idea. It is the discipline of keeping command where command still belongs. The engine has failed. The phone has no signal. The water bottle is empty. The ignition has already given its answer with that metallic click. Now the question is not whether the situation is pleasant. It is not. The question is whether the ruling faculty will practice its own work. This is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it means feeling nothing. They think it means staring at danger with a blank face. That is not discipline. That is theater. Epictetus did not ask a person to become stone. He asked a person to stop becoming a servant to every impression that strikes the mind. So the training begins with accuracy. Say what is present. The car is stopped. The phone is useless for contact right now. The bottle is empty. The heat is severe. The mind is being pressed toward panic. These statements are plain. They do not flatter you. They do not terrify you more than necessary. They do not turn the moment into a story about fate, punishment, unfairness, or identity. They are a disciplined inventory. Ascesis starts there because a confused mind cannot choose well. Then comes the second exercise, refuse the extra sentence. The extra sentence says, this should not be happening to me. But it is happening. The extra sentence says, I cannot bear this. But the question is not whether you enjoy it. The question is whether you will govern the next assent. The extra sentence says, because I feel fear, fear is entitled to command. That is the sentence to reject. Fear may appear. Urgency may appear. The body may demand action. But appearance is not authority. The task is to take the impression in hand before it takes the person in hand. This is the exercise no one sees. No one applauds it. No one records it. There is only the private labor of not letting the first appearance rule the next decision. Now return attention to the empty water bottle. Not because it solves the problem. It does not. Not because it contains comfort. It does not. Return to it because attention has to be trained on something definite. The mind under pressure becomes large and wild. It runs into future hours, imagined outcomes, old regrets, and accusations against the present. The bottle is small. It brings thought back to a single visible fact. Empty. That is all. Do not let it become a prophecy. Do not let it become an insult. Do not let it speak beyond its office. The bottle has no moral opinion about you. It is not evidence that you are helpless as a person. It is evidence that one resource is gone. A trained mind can use even that unpleasant fact for order. This is ascesis inside the scenario. Take what presses against you and use it to practice correct relation. The failed engine trains the distinction between preference and command. The lost signal trains patience with what is not immediately available. The heat trains seriousness without surrender. The empty bottle trains attention without exaggeration. The repeated ignition click trains refusal of automatic assent. Each external thing becomes a place where the ruling faculty can either abandon its station or return to it. And returning is not dramatic. It may look like silence. It may look like one breath before the next action. It may look like a person lowering his hand from the ignition instead of turning the key again and again as if repetition could force reality to obey. It may look like looking at the scene without the demand that the scene become different before reason can begin. This is not weakness. This is command. The untrained mind mistakes agitation for action. It believes that because it is stirred, it is doing something. But agitation often spends strength without judgment. It burns attention. It narrows sight. It converts difficulty into disorder. Stoic practice asks for something harder than agitation: deliberate conduct under unwelcome facts. Epictetus says, before the body moves, let judgment be examined. What is the event? What is the impression? What am I adding? What still belongs to me? What is the next governable act? That sequence does not remove the desert. It removes confusion from the soul. It keeps the person from treating panic as a better guide than reason. It restores rank. Externals remain external. The ruling faculty returns to its office. And even there, with no audience, no help visible, no comforting sign from the phone, the work is not wasted. Because the true training was never to make the road obey. It was to keep the mind from kneeling before what is not its master. Once judgment is steadied, conduct has a place to stand. This matters because Stoicism is not an excuse to remain motionless. Epictetus never taught a person to hide inside the phrase "not in my control" and abandon duty. The boundary of control is not a shelter for laziness. It is the beginning of responsibility. When you know what is not yours, you stop wasting strength on it. When you know what is yours, you no longer have permission to neglect it. In the stranded car, duty is not grand. It is exact. You do not owe the desert an argument. You do not owe the failed engine another display of frustration. You do not owe panic your obedience. You owe the situation clear judgment, disciplined attention, and the next reasonable action available under the facts. That is conduct. The engine has failed. Good. Stop treating the failure as a personal insult. The phone has no signal. Good. Stop treating silence as a verdict on your worth. The water bottle is empty. Good. Stop letting that fact become a prophecy about the whole future. The sun is high. Good. Stop pretending preference has authority over noon. Now act from what remains. This is where responsibility becomes severe. The mind may want to say, I cannot be expected to think clearly here. But that is exactly where thinking clearly is required. Not perfectly. Not with comfort. Not with confidence that the outcome will obey. Clearly enough to keep impulse from becoming ruler. A person who gives command to panic has not escaped danger. He has added disorder to danger. A person who keeps judgment in office has not guaranteed safety. He has preserved the one faculty through which any proper action must pass. That is the difference. Stoicism does not promise control over results. It demands responsibility for the ruling faculty that meets those results. So the question is not, how do I force this to end? The question is, what does duty require from me before the outcome is known? Duty may require that you stop repeating the same useless motion. The hand reaches again for the ignition. The key turns. The click answers. The mind wants to try again, not because judgment has chosen it, but because repetition feels like control. At some point, discipline says, enough. Do not confuse nervous motion with responsible conduct. Duty may require that you look directly at the facts without adding drama. The car is here. The road is empty. The phone is silent. The bottle is empty. The sun is high. The mind is under pressure. These facts are unwelcome, but they are not improved by exaggeration. A responsible person does not need the moment to be pleasant in order to be accurate. Duty may require conserving attention. That is a real task. Attention is not unlimited. Under pressure, the mind spends it wildly, on regret, on imagined blame, on fear of what others would think, on anger at timing, on resentment toward chance. But none of those thoughts repair the engine, restore the signal, or govern the next response. They only scatter the faculty needed for conduct. Here, responsibility means refusing to spend your mind where you have no office. You are not the governor of weather. You are not the governor of distance. You are not the governor of mechanical failure. You are not the governor of whether help appears when you prefer it. But you are the governor of whether your next act comes from judgment or from surrender to impression. That is not a small office. It is the central office. The Stoic does not ask, What outcome will prove I am safe, competent, or favored? He asks, what action is consistent with reason, courage, and self-command now? Those virtues do not depend on favorable scenery. They are not decorations for easy days. They are tested when the props are removed. The empty water bottle remains in sight. It can still train you. It says nothing. It accuses nothing. It simply presents a fact. If the mind can remain accurate with this one object, it can begin to remain accurate with the whole situation. Empty does not mean hopeless. Failed does not mean finished. Alone does not mean without duty. Heat does not mean reason has been dismissed. This is how identity detaches from circumstance. You are not the running engine. You are not the signal bar. You are not the full bottle. You are not the favorable condition. If you attach your identity to these things, then every external failure becomes a collapse of the self. But if you place your identity in the use of judgment, then even an unwelcome condition becomes material for responsibility. Conduct does not require certainty. It requires order. Order in speech, even if no one hears it. Order in attention, even if the mind wants to scatter. Order in movement, even if fear demands speed. Order in judgment, even when the impression arrives with force. That order is not for show. No audience is standing on the road. No one is measuring your face. No one is awarding virtue for remaining composed in a broken car. This is why the moment is clean. It removes reputation. It removes performance. It leaves only the question Epictetus would press into the center of the mind. Will you govern what is yours, or will you hand it over to what is not? Responsibility begins when the answer is no longer spoken as theory. It is practiced under the sun. Freedom does not begin when the engine starts. Freedom begins before the outcome changes, when the mind stops treating the outcome as its master. That is the final test in the stranded car. The road is still empty. The sun is still high. The phone is still silent. The bottle is still empty. But the ruling faculty does not have to be empty. Epictetus would not call this victory because the world obeyed. He would call it freedom because judgment returned to its proper office. You are not free because conditions are favorable. Favorable conditions can disappear in one metallic click. You are free when you can meet an unfavorable condition without giving it authority over your assent. You are free when fear appears, and you do not make it king. You are free when the mind says, "This is hard," without adding, "Therefore I am no longer responsible." That is the inner task no one sees. No crowd. No praise. No reputation to protect. Just a person under pressure, separating fact from judgment, refusing the trap of speed, and choosing the next governable act. The desert may still be dangerous. The engine may still be dead. Help may still be out of sight. Stoicism does not erase those facts. It teaches you not to surrender the only faculty by which any fact must be met. So when the click fails again, do not let it speak beyond its station. It is a sound. Your assent is still yours. Return to what is yours to govern.